is with us. If we have any particular questions on the operator SDK Helm support, I think Simon, please keep me honest. I think Simon's team has done some enhancements to the existing Helm support, and then probably and that's why he was pointed to me by Joe. So with that said, Sandeep, is it a good time for give the floor to Simon and introduce himself?
Definitely. I mean, hope Simon knows the background that we were trying to see the option of Helm operator to see if it can help us to onboard a lot of Helm charts, the existing legacy Helm charts into the Nephew system, and we can leverage that. So there were many questions around that previously. Bala helped us with some other people also. So yes, the floor is yours, and provide us the update, and if you have any features added and all those things which we can leverage in Nephew, that would be very much of help. Yeah. So
Cool.
Simon,
Thank
floor
you.
is yours. Yeah.
Yeah. Please, Simon, please give us introduction, and please let us also know what you've been working on the Helm side of operator SDK. Please give us the context. And with that said, we will after that most likely we'll get the questions from the team. I think I'm so glad Fiakra is also in the forum. So please go ahead, Simon.
Cool. Thank you. And sorry for having no video. Like I'm usually using Google Meet and Zoom does not work with my setup currently.
Yeah.
So
we're all video shy. Yeah.
I'm more or less part of Operator SDK, so we use Helm operator plugins a lot in our operator, and we're the first who adopted it and are continuously working on it and improving it. Currently, I'm working with StackRock's Advanced Cluster Security, and what we are doing is basically installing an agent which does some observability on your resources and enforces some policies. For example, don't deploy an image with an image tag latest, for example. And what we did was, after the StackRock's acquisition, we wrote like a Helm chart, which was supporting like a lot of features in Helm and needed a way to support Helm and operator at the same time, and also to have a way to really wrap up an operator fast after we were acquired. And so we went with the Helm operator plugins, or the Helm operator approach. And we are using it till today successfully, and it runs on 1,600 clusters right now actively, installing and managing our application. Any questions so far? Or is it sufficient as an introduction?
Thank you. Very, very novice question from my side. So is the Helm operator plugin that you said, is it distinct from the operator SDK itself, or is it like a fork?
It is not a fork. It's so. This is where. Can you see my screen? Like the Zoom meeting right now?
Yes.
So here I'm honestly a bit on the limit of my knowledge. So the Helm operator plugins is supported by Operator Framework. It's also supported in Operator SDK itself. We used it as a time where it was not. At the time, it was like in a private repo by Joe. We adopted it and used it. How I understood it now is that Operator Framework supports it. It's a plugin in Operator SDK to support hybrid operators like we do now. It's officially supported and kept up to date by the team, and we also provide upstream patches to it.
Okay. So this is the upstream. This is the upstream for that. This is the upstream.
This is the upstream, yes.
Okay, got it.
And we have like a downstream version here. And we upstream our changes to Operator Framework.
So Simon, I've asked this question. Hi, Simon. Thanks for this. I've asked this question a few times, but I guess we're still a little bit confused that, yes, we understand that this is the correct version of the tool to use. But can I ask, why is it not included officially in Operator SDK, or if there's a roadmap to include it?
I think we should write it down and ask Joe directly. I think he can answer this good asynchronously. I
Okay.
cannot say. I understood that this is the plugins, and this is like just a new approach on how operator SDK gets like extended, and it's officially like this. More I don't know, honestly. It was
Okay.
like intended to be like this to be more extensible in the first place. We liked, like from our perspective, we liked it because we didn't need it to include all the operator framework dependencies, just could rely on Helm operator plugins here.
Yeah, that makes sense. Of course, it's usable as it is, but I hope you understand the the source of my question, right? We in this Nefio project, we are considering investing in our own SDK based on this, and you know, there are concerns about long-term support for our investment, right? So that's why I'm asking this question, right? To see if there's a roadmap for this, and if we adopt it and make use of it, if we can expect that the community around it will also adopt it. Of course, there are no guarantees, but it could give us information, a data point in terms of making our own decisions.
Yes. So, like, I'm not too deep into Nephew SDK. Is it like that some SDK or engine is using the Helm operator plugins under the hood, or is it used to install the SDK or tooling you develop?
Well, in a way, both. So our SDK is more comprehensive than just operators. It's currently in a design phase, so we do not have something quite yet. But a big part of this SDK is a tool to make it easier to build operators. And one aspect of this is to use existing Helm charts to build operators. So we have a few options on the table for solving it, but one of the attractive ones is exactly to use these plugins for the operator SDK.
Yeah. So, any
Okay.
more questions?
Yeah,
So-
obviously. Please go ahead, Bala.
One question. So Simon, in terms of parity, is this upstream purely from this particular repo perspective? Is it on parity with what you have done with StackRacks, or is there anything, any patches that are not pushed here for any particular reason, or is this being actively any enhancement that you do to the downstream, is it pushed upstream for this one in this repo?
We have patches which are not upstream yet. And the reason why they are not yet upstreamed is because we didn't have the time to do it right now. So we do it like in batches and then
Okay.
work on them. And that's the reason.
Okay, but you intend
So-
to push them upstream. Yeah.
Yes, there we
Okay.
intend to.
Okay. Piakara, I think you would like to ask question. I think you please go ahead.
Yeah, hi Simon, thanks very much for joining. Just a very quick one. From your experience working with the Helm operator plugin, have you been working with existing legacy Helm charts, and what have you come across any issues, shortcomings with the tool itself for handling those?
So what do you mean with legacy Helm charts?
So essentially, if I understand correctly, the operator plugin will take a Helm chart and build an operator for it, in a very crude understanding of the tool. Am I correct in that?
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, legacy Helm chart, but yeah, an existing Helm chart, I guess, is your base artifact to feed to the tool, right?
Yes.
In terms of the charts themselves, do they need to be restructured, redesigned in a way to accommodate the tool, or can any Helm charts you've come across be handled or managed by the plugin?
Not every. We had limitations with ours.
Mhm.
They were minor. So
Okay.
first, I would say that the Helm charts we've implemented in StackRocks push Helm to its limits. So we, for example, generate TLS secrets inside Helm, which should not be Helm managed, that a customer or user doesn't delete it by accident, or the PVC.
Mhm.
And for these type of things, basically, which we generated in Helm, which could also be user provided, which are later not Helm managed, we needed to generate them in the operator.
Okay.
So what we did basically is, I can look right into here. I hope it's helpful. Like, we see here, we have our Helm charts. This is a StackRox central Helm chart, StackRox secured cluster. So our operator does even 2 Helm charts at the same time. Here's our operator code. How this works is basically the operator embeds the StackRox central and StackRox secured cluster files via the go embed directive. And what we did, or how this works, is basically the reconciler of the Helm operator plugins applies the Helm chart, and there are some extension points around it. So we could go in, for example, the central, that's like our control plane. And we see here like a bunch of extensions which run before or after an Helm install. And for example, like the admin password is something we generate for the user, central DB password.
So
But
they're
these are
like
pretty minor
they're
things.
a pre-install or pre-install hook equivalent, are they? They're the equivalent of a.
Yes, that would
Yeah.
be pre-install hook, for example.
Okay. That was leads into the other question. Is there a scope for extending to support full LCM of the chart? It's not a chart, but you know what I mean. If you had a particular chart with hooks, does it have support for that, or pre-install, post-install hooks, etc., or
Like when you use the Helm operator plugins, how the pre and post install hooks work?
yeah, or just or even in terms of, I think Tal, you talk a lot about day 1, day 2 configuration and stuff like that. I'm still kind of getting my,
Yeah,
but
I mean,
you know, yep.
maybe I can ask. I mean, is it like possible to have some sort of a action or some sort of a trigger point when we know that okay, these deployments are available and they're not up to the mark? Can I modify the controller to take some sort of a business logic, put business logic into it so that I can scale up, scale down based on some sort of a scenarios? Is it kind of thing is possible to do it here? Maybe that's
Yes.
okay.
Like basically, I would consider the Helm operator in that case, the Helm values are the public API, and in the operator with Go code, I can do everything I want as Go and just render some Helm values for the Helm chart and apply them to the cluster.
Okay.
Okay. Maybe I think we have not explored. No, none of anyone of us have explored in that level. Maybe that's a good options to see if someone can take it up this one and explore it. So we'll consider that and see really it has kind of a capabilities which we are discussing, and it really suits the nephew point of view agenda.
I
So
just one
there-
very sorry. Go ahead, Tal.
I would say there are 2 different aspects to this. One of them is, I think what Sandeep is talking about here is, so what the SDK does is basically generate code that will call and use the Helm chart. So of course, once you have generated code, you can add your own code. You can do anything you want in the reconciliation function to reconcile changes for day 2. I think it would be a little bit awkward, right? Because you don't actually have the code to generate the day 1 versions of it. So you have to look into the Helm chart and know what you're generating, but it's absolutely possible, right? So mixing and matching Go code changes with Helm chart generation, I think would be a little bit awkward, but absolutely possible. But I think maybe there was another question here regarding day 2 features in Helm itself, right? So Helm does support upgrades. If you use the Helm install command and there's a new version of the chart, the Helm tool can do a diff and see what the differences are and do an upgrade. but I don't think that feature is supported, I think, inside the operator SDK.
As far as I'm aware, no.
To do Helm upgrades,
Right.
it's supported.
Inside the reconciliation loop. It is supported?
Yes, but you need to
Okay.
upgrade the Helm chart itself inside the operator. So the operator must know somehow about the Helm chart itself.
Okay, so it can't be external. You actually have to rebuild the operator.
Or dynamically download the chart files.
Okay.
Or somehow another way.
Yeah, I think that's one of the big difference, because operator SDK, you point it to a Helm charts and they sort of embed the Helm charts somewhere on the build. But whereas like something say Flux, you have the CLD that points to the repo, and then if you change the CL that points
It'll
to a
trigger a
later version of the
reconciler.
Helm charts, then it would load that Helm charts. So I think that was a slight difference, because that's because of the workflow of the operator SDK.
I do think that the new version of this operator does support using a Helm chart from a URL. I don't think it has to be embedded in the operator, but I might be wrong.
So I'm not sure if it supports from URL, but it would not be.
But then that kind of goes around the workflow, because the CL for the values.yaml needs to be generated at compile time, if you will, at the time when you generate the CL. So the CLDs. So if you point to a URL, and then if you upgrade the Helm charts on what the URL points to, then I don't know how that workflow really works.
As long as the values YAML stays the same, right? There's no change to the values YAML.
Yeah, so yeah, that's a given. If values.yaml stay the same, then sure.
Yeah.
So
if it doesn't, then I don't know how that would work.
I would generally more describe like the Helm operator plugins like basically like a library to wrap the Helm client in a reconciler, which is extensible. And if you're looking into like generating some code which leverages Helm charts and operators, Helm operator SDK is the best I've seen so far. So I don't know what the current state is. I've seen like some other projects also doing similar things. But this is, for example, how it looks like when we would instantiate a new reconciler. We load the chart from a path. We could also relatively easy exchange this with like downloaded from a URL or something. And then like a reconciler is instantiated and started, and that's all you need to do. Of course, like how the values comes in from a CRD, that's up to the implementer later.
I just have one final question, Simon. It kind of leads into what you were saying there. In terms of the values YAML, is there any, like we kind of talk loosely around, you know, how do you control that public API? Is there any, do you see of any usefulness in maybe defining a schema or having some kind of design rules around the values YAML?
It depends
you know,
on the user's needs.
Yeah.
So
okay, yeah.
you can do like a dynamic CRD, which basically dynamically would translate the values provided in the CR directly to the values of the Helm chart. Or you can also, that's what we did, implement a custom resource with a specific like schema and translate it or like convert it to the Helm values.
Okay, and then generates a config map from that, is it, or something equivalent?
So for example, in our case, like an official operator by Red Hat on OpenShift, like we don't give like the user undefined Helm values at the hand to install it. We want to come across as professional, give like a good API.
Yeah,
but if it would be like just an internal operator, we would not have like generated or a CR, we would just done it dynamically.
But yeah, so you can control what you expose to the
Exactly.
to the end. Yeah.
And
Thank
also
you.
documentation,
Thanks.
etc.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yes. So
Fiakra and Sandeep and also Tom, you also had some questions about the nested charts, right? Can you please ask that to Simon where things stand there?
Yeah, I can probably speak to that. We had it. I did very kind of high level testing with the operator SDK, and we had a sample chart that had nested Helm charts within it, and it didn't like that structure for some reason in the way that the operator was trying to. So yeah, essentially it tried to it tarred the subcharts and then couldn't find them. I think it's probably a minor bug, but it didn't seem to like the nesting.
So when you add a subchart in the charts directory or something.
Yeah. So even multiple levels. I don't know if you've come across that issue.
We've just had like some small prototype, like, but we don't usually use subcharts, so we don't use them.
Okay, so you don't generally use nesting.
Yes, that's something,
Okay.
for example, we don't use. We
Okay.
make heavy use of all the Go templating engine and generation.
Yeah, and is that a just a preference, or is that a recommendation not to try and have a standalone chart and to avoid having nesting dependencies?
I avoid nesting dependencies on
You
Helm and
avoid, okay.
operators both. So
Okay,
like I don't
yeah.
like them in general. Like never had good experiences with them.
Yeah,
So
no, me neither with Helm. No.
like from my experiences, like the issues we saw, of course, there were like also bugs in like Helm operator plugins. But most of the issues and limitations we had were like more bound to Helm itself than to the Helm operator plugins, and pretty easily extensible.
Okay.
So it's not a very
Yeah.
big project, and yeah.
Is this just you're specifically working on Helm? Well, I guess Helm is a discussion here, but obviously there's Ansible support as well. Is there? You're not involved in that space at all, or?
Like we develop it actively currently because we're using it in our operator and a lot of different clusters. We are just not like full-time working on operator framework.
Okay.
Like
Yeah.
this Helm operator plugins is also not a
That's your
full-time project.
That's your focus.
Like,
Yeah. Gotcha.
So Simon, just to ask that thing from the feature completeness perspective, you said you had some prototype for that nested chart thing. So do you think at some point of time that bug will be fixed and it will be in the upstream, or do you think that is not the focus at all?
I think from my experience that if the bug is not production critical, that one would need to implement itself and upstream it. From my experience, like Joe, Varsha, and other maintainers of this repo are very supportive and provide code reviews. Also happy to add you as a reviewer yourself when you proved a bit to have knowledge about the project and its goals, and work on it by yourself. Like otherwise, it took too long to like wait for a fix until it's prioritized and implemented. And most of the times, if I knew the fix in the reconciler, I could also fix it.
Okay.
Like, are you very familiar with operators? Like, we could just go like once above the reconcile function of the Helm operator plugins, which could give some insights on how it works internally.
Yeah, I think many of us are quite familiar. Simon, I wonder if I can ask you another question. Just based on your experience in working with this technology quite a lot, we have a lot of options on the table, and some of them are very different from this operator SDK. For example, we're looking at the Flux framework, which has support for, there is a Helm operator in Flux that does all of this dynamically, basically, right? Instead of creating a custom operator for your Helm chart, what it does is really use an existing Helm chart in a Helm chart repository and basically installs it. But the operator runs on the cluster, and essentially automates the running of the Helm install command, right, for you, and can use the standard declarative Kubernetes-based approach to, there's a CR, right, with a Helm chart, and it just installs it for you. The end result from the user experience is very similar, right? You just provide the Helm chart, you provide the values.yaml, and it gets installed for you. So two very different approaches to solve the same problem, right? How do you incorporate Helm charts in an operator automated environment? But I wonder, Simon, if from your perspective, what are the pros and cons of each approach, if you even have an opinion on this?
I think Flux sounds to me at first like sophisticated. I hope this is the right English word. Like it's very suited to like provide a Helm chart and just install it and maintain it like you would maintain a normal Helm chart. You can achieve the same in this repository as well, or like with the Helm operator plugins, and you have more capabilities to extend it later. I think the operator SDK itself provides you a generation function to achieve the same, that you can generate the operator using a Helm chart basically in the same way as you would use it with Flux. But honestly, I'm not sure if this is supported in operator SDK. I think that's something which would need to be added. So Flux seems to me like the I have a Helm chart and want to just get it go. And if I want to have more capabilities, for example, in our case, with state 2 operations and go above level 2, I would like to have like the Helm operator plugins instead.
Yeah, that's my thinking too, right? That the operator SDK approach gives you a basis for transition, right? You can add Go code, which you cannot do in Flux. Flux is absolutely locked to whatever is in the chart itself. And also, I think you have an avenue to eventually leaving Helm entirely, because once you have a Go code, you have a project that generates an operator, and you start to add day 2 changes, eventually you can also remove the Helm chart entirely from the equation and replace it with Go code. And then you have an 100% Go-based operator, right? So I think the operator SDK approach has a very strong ability to enable that transition if you're planning it. But yeah, technology-wise, yes, there's certain features maybe that one has and the other doesn't. But I think those are entirely fixable, right? We can really, if we really want to invest in the operator SDK, we can add those features. We can contribute to the project and make sure that everything works, right? Even for Helm plugins, I think it's possible to do things like running those plugins on an external pod somewhere, right? Like something like a plugin runner. Many projects have similar technologies. I feel like if we really want to, the operator SDK can fully support every Helm feature that we would need. We would just have to code it and contribute those that to the project.
Yeah, I mean,
it's kind of interesting to think how this would fit into the Nephio flow of doing things. Something I've been thinking about since last week. Operator SDK, then you have a kit package in effect, and then you're deploying it. What's actually happening and how the mechanism of that works is interesting. I mean, is it on the management cluster, or is it in the workload clusters for a start? I guess it's in the management cluster. Am I correct? Or stop me if I'm talking rubbish here.
Can you repeat the question?
Well, no, this is more of a kind of an FEO question now. For us.
So mostly we penciled that into workload clusters. I think that was what actually we've been talking about.
We have, except that there's another option on our table that's very interesting that I think Wim has supports for, and at least I included it in the original document, what we sometimes call the sandwich approach, whereby, yes, it's entirely in the management cluster. So we could potentially take a Helm chart, explode it into the KRM resources that it generates using basically the equivalent of the Helm template command instead of the Helm install command. And once we have those KRM resources, we put it through the our current specialization process. So Helm becomes just a way to generate those initial KRM, but from the workload's perspective, it has no idea that it originally came from Helm, right? So
Well,
that's also an approach. Yeah.
More or less, that's the approach we have taken in one of the SDK which we developed at all. So, and it's gonna fully generate the code from the Helms, and hopefully that will be available as I discussed.
It's already supported. There is a kept function that already exists that takes a Helm chart and turns it into the KRM.
We've done that already. Yes.
Yeah.
And that's why OAI, it was very helpful for the OAI when they onboarded, created the controller out of it. So yeah, hopefully it will be
that's kind of
owned by nephew.
So I mean, if you say right that we have the flux for the kind of Helm stuff that we don't want to touch, and then maybe we get a little bit more adventurous for the Helm that we do want to touch. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, Simon, for drifting off there down a rabbit hole.
Go ahead.
What is the use case in Nephew exactly for using the Helm operator? Like if you would use it for like your sorry.
Oh, sorry. The use case in general for Helm is to protect current investments from our never function vendors. So the idea is, I mean, which is probably unlikely, but then the idea is ideally they don't have to change the Helm charts onboarded onto Nephields, still get the Nephil experience for day one at least, and then there would be a simple onboarding exercise. So that was the idea. I mean, in essence, there will be a little more work because supposedly you still conform to the Nephil CLDs, and then we can have to reconcile what that input versus the Helm values input, and then you'll be generating some sort of operators to execute Helm.
So Nephil is a tool to basically deploy applications.
Yeah, well, Nephil, the automation pieces, we would like that remains as much as possible, and then the one idea, not all of them, because Tal just talked about having a management cluster. One of the idea is to have Helm as the one that executes. So at the end you end up with values.yaml, and then feed it into the Helm charts, and then you execute Helm on the workload clusters itself. And then the other idea is the Helm charts get uploaded just to be resolved down to a bunch of Kubernetes resources, and then apply them without touching any Nephil operators. I think that I still don't know how that works actually. And then but then the core idea is onboarding vendors using Helm, and then give them a platform to eventually move out of Helm into an operator.
Okay.
Well, operator plus other Nephil hook points. So this is more than just an operator.
We have so many options on the table. We can support all of them to an extent too. There are pros and cons, and at the end of the day, we can't stop any user from onboarding whatever way they please, right? With open source, including, right, of course, the open air interface components used the Python SDK, KOPF, and didn't use Go at all. So that's an option which we also, I think, want to support as best as we can, right? We have to pick and choose our battles here and what we want to support best, and also make suggestions for best practices, right? But there really isn't a best practice here. The industry really hasn't aligned on the best way to do this. and best practices can also evolve. I'd say there's no huge price to pay if you do one versus the other, because our idea is still to make Helm charts a first-class citizen, right? So if the Helm chart is there, you can onboard it with method A or method B, but you're not changing the same Helm chart. And if your developers are continuing to change that Helm chart, you just have to repeat the process, whatever it is, right, to onboard, which you would have to do anyway. I'll say that from my perspective, I always have this principle where use tools the way they're supposed to be used, right? Every time you try to use Helm differently, even use it as a library versus a command line tool, you get into trouble. You diverge from what the tool and the community around the tool are really focused on. So you're using an unsupported path to an extent. Flux is the simplest, right? Flux basically does a Helm install for you. It does what a manual developer would do, just does it for you. To an extent, that's the least risky path, right, in terms of diverging from the Helm project.
Yeah. But do you just on that topic, do you get into a scenario then where you can say that it's unsupported, but say if we do go ahead and use the Operator SDK or the Helm plugin SDK, obviously that's we'll call it the advanced Helm integration or Helm used within Nefio, because it gives you much more control and extensibility or whatever. But then my concern would be that you would have multiple ways to do one thing, but does that not cause confusion across the that's
I agree. We'll have to make it.
I mean, so for the SDK, obviously we want to be inclusive, but then at some point we do want to pick a way, a particular way that we want to that we highlight at least. As Tao said, I mean, I'm not here to stop people from contributing both the Flux options and the Operator SDK options. Well, we can create a Nefio SDK that include both. It's confusing, but then it could include both. I mean, I'm not here to stop people from doing that.
The Flux thing was just it was a POC, and we bunged it in, and it means people can spin up their Helm charts easily, but ultimately,
I could understand it actually. Last time we had a face-to-face where Liam was in the room too. There's a good explanations from you folks on using Flux because all the features that are available. You try other things, and then and that's a legitimate thing. You guys are a major NF vendors, and then you pick that needs, and then that need is there, and that needs may only be satisfied by Flux. And that's a very strong data point for us to actually be able to support it.
Yeah, there are like Zargo, Zargo, there's others, but the SDK is interesting to me. I need to know, I need to learn more about Golang and stuff like that. But my only the decision, what's the term? Decision fatigue, or I can't, I don't remember the time. But
I know,
what I mean?
So this topic,
you know what I mean?
This topic by itself is kind of fatiguing.
So I hate to do this, but I do want to add one more dimension. Obviously, we're still collecting data to help us make the decision, but we're missing one big piece of the puzzle that Simon was pointing at as well, the day two operations, right? The real magic of the Operator SDK, the killer feature that makes it very different from all the other approaches on our table, is that you can add Go code to do day two changes. And honestly, in Nefio, we have not done any of this. We have not showcased why an operator is so much better than Helm, right? The idea that you can actually do a day two reconciliation with code programmatically that takes into account current conditions, external conditions, etc. For example, doing self-healing, self-scaling, anything with self in the prefix, right? That's what an operator does. It does it on its own. It delegates that work from the management cluster locally to where that data is available, right? So you can disconnect yourself from the network entirely, right? The management cluster is disconnected, and the operator can still do very powerful things. That's a killer app feature that Helm can never do, right? Helm has no programmatic day two anything.
Is there anything in relation? So say if you take the 5GC, is there anything there that could be showcased in that?
Yes. Yeah. I'm really pushing us to have a self-healing scenario. I think that's the most powerful. we've talked about self-scaling as well. But the thing about self-scaling, you can also handle it with a management cluster, right? As long as it's connected, right? But I think self-healing is very powerful. The idea that you can make your application more robust, and it's robust on its own. You don't have to connect an external manager or some system or anything.
Well,
You deploy
Kubernetes
it.
manages it for you, right? Kubernetes will manage to, you know,
Some
stuff,
aspects, right?
scaling.
Kubernetes can restart pods, but Kubernetes really assumes that everything is stateless, right? That's what it's designed for, right? Stateless microservices. But if you have something like a database, if you have something like a network function, you want that self-healing to occur, but you don't want connections to be lost or data to be lost.
Yeah.
And those kinds of semantics are always product specific, right? MongoDB is different from Postgres. A Nokia AMF is different from an Ericsson AMF. So that kind of logic is always specialized. It always has to be baked into a controller, an operator. So we haven't really.
Does that then make the controller, the operator, a lot more complex?
Of course.
In its, yeah. Well,
yeah. But it is that's the complexity that, of course, we want, right? All this automation that we're creating here is designed to do that. You know, have networks that are robust and can adapt to changes. And some of those changes, of course, are failures, right? System failures. So that's where self-healing comes along. So yeah, we have to create those use cases, because I feel like so far a lot of this is theoretical. We know that the operator SDK can give us day 2 power, but we don't actually have a use case that we're using, right? That actually showcasing that. So in a strange way, you know, Flux is a very easy, you know, low friction solution. Operator SDK is the highest friction solution, right? Because we're generating code, etc. But it doesn't seem like the high friction solution gives us anything real at this point. We know that it can, but we haven't really showed it yet to ourselves and to the world. So to me, that's a big missing piece of our puzzle right now in terms of our data points, right?
So how I would imagine it right now in Nephew, it's like, for example, like the Flux operator would run, the Flux Helm operator, and you create, when a customer wants a Flux Helm CR with the Helm chart in it and the values they provide. And then the Flux controller would reconcile this, right?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, the Flux CLs, as far as I know, are basically pointing to the Helm charts and which repo the Helm chart exists. So this is like a control data, metadata of telling you which Helm charts to fetch and execute which Helm charts. So when you point to it, you can, the Helm controller in this case would directly execute.
It's GitOps, right? So it's GitOps. It's using
GitOps.
GitOps.
It would directly execute that Helm chart with the values.yaml that's also on Git repo.
Right. We're closing that loop right now. We're adding observability to the management cluster. So the idea is that you can really do all of this in the management cluster, right? The code sits there. So if the management cluster knows that there's a problem, some system failure, it could. We have a very robust system to go back to your original blueprint, to change it and adapt it, etc. We have a place where you can put that code. But obviously, there are issues of scalability, right? You know, a single management cluster might handle 100,000 workload clusters, right? So, and what if there's a disconnection, right? The power of operators of Kubernetes is that it is self-orchestrating, right? That's a power we're not leveraging right now, but the operator SDK gives us an opportunity to leverage it, right?
Okay. Fine,
Yeah,
then.
this got a little philosophical, I guess.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I mean, essentially, I mean, obviously, I mean, Simon, I mean, the Nephew is very CRD operator centric. This is where we want to be. This is what we want the world to be. But ideally, the world is not there, right? So that's why we want to support the existing ecosystem. That's where this whole discussion. Probably I should have I should have given the context before. Or I might have given you a Slack. I'm not sure.
I'm trying to understand if you can get away with implementing a Helm operator on yourself or not. I'm not sure if I understood Nephew in its essence. So would you ship like an Helm operator, like the Flux operator, or like operator SDK operator, whatever? Or would the customer or user need to install that manually themselves?
Yeah, so we can install the operators as part of default. So if we, let's say the SDK pick one, then we'll auto generates a package that actually has this operator, either Helm controllers or Helm operators, depending on which one we pick, and then we install it because we know we're onboarding these network functions using Helm charts. We can do that. The big thing for us isn't so much the operators to pick, is the workflow and how would that fit into the entire Nephew automation pipeline. Yeah, so I think if we resolve it down to Helm, or the other way where Helm resolve all the Kubernetes resources on the management clusters, then it depends on which way we're picking it.
And how do you expect the Helm feature to be used? Is it like a lot of users would use it, or
a lot of users would use it? What we want to do in SDK is to ease the onboarding of the network function vendors. So there are many puzzles to make Nephew successful, and one major pillar is, of course, if Nephew is not supported by any network function vendors, it's useless. Also, so we do want to expedite that process and make vendors comfortable actually onboarding. So that's actually our mandate more than anything else on the SDK team, is to ensure that the network function vendors can be onboarded, whereas the after onboarding, while could be limited in terms of functionalities, would still give the users the pretty similar experience. But then they do understand that moving forward, when it's not day two operations. There's some day two operations, as Tao said. The step after that, as a community, not just the SDK team, would have to strongly send a use case where migrations to operator Nephew way, quote unquote, would be much more ideal. And then once we have that use case firmly in place and clearly demonstrated, it will be very, very difficult to do on Helm. Then the SDK would also be having features to ease the transitions from your Helm charts to a Nephew solutions, because it's not just operator. We have hooks to add logics into a management cluster also.
But I think there's not key, I think that's the main objective, is to encourage people to transition away from Helm.
Yes.
But I think it's coming from another project that tried to do closed loop automation, etc., and from my point of view didn't really do it well. Trying to add in day two. Yeah, look at it. It's a side question. Sorry, just because I have you here, Tal, and Stephen as well. In terms of the Nephew SDK, in theory, wouldn't just be Helm support. It would also look to generate stubs of some sort for a user to build an operator as well. Is that the plan, or?
So I think what Simon said is there's a generated operator in Go, and then you can go into there and manually write Go code to extend any day two things, and that's true. It is true. And then I wouldn't even completely strike out the idea that perhaps we'll do day one with Helm anyway. I mean, midterm, not long term, but then medium term, we'll do day one on Helm anyway, and then start having that another operator extensions that allows you to actually do more dynamic situations. But then it'll be very convoluted, and then we'll see how it goes. But then I wouldn't want to say definitely transition is all and for all. Go stop all your Helm all your Helm developments and just go with the Nephew way of doing things.
Right. There's a way in which the operator SDK, I mean, everything we're doing right now is pretty low level with the operator SDK, because it generates Go code and expects you to go in and do that. It's actually very, very challenging to write a good, robust operator, right? Doing day two changes. There are a lot of little tricky things having to do with the highly asynchronous environment of Kubernetes, right? So what we're hoping, our point here, this must be very confusing to Simon. In the room right now, there are no users. Our users are the telecommunication companies, and Google is a cloud provider. Nokia, Ericsson are network function application providers, but we're not actually the users, we're providers. The users here want a cheap and easy experience, right, in terms of onboarding new applications, network functions into the system. So we're never going to reduce the cost to zero, but the idea is to make it really as cheap and reliable as possible. So imagine an SDK that really handles all the Kubernetes stuff for you and lets you create a simple plugin just to add your business logic, right, for day 2, right? So that's also an option we're considering, right? So something like this operator SDK Go code, this might be something that the Nefio project handles, but we would not want the quote unquote users here, the application packagers, to have to deal with all of that, right? If we can make it as easy as possible for them, right? You know, one of the attractive things about Helm that it's relatively easy to use, right? If you want to package a Helm chart, you just have to do a little bit of text templating and get some inputs. You have the opportunity to create plugins if you really need them using a language like Python. It's relatively low friction, right? I would say it's about as easy as writing an Ansible playbook.
Yeah.
But creating an operator, you know, having to learn potentially Go, and dealing with a concurrent and very complex environment, I think it requires a lot of expertise that not everybody has, right? It's a higher order of complexity than just creating a Helm chart, right?
But that's the kind of idea Nephew has, right? To bring everyone to the operators world.
Exactly.
We're
Would
very
you
have a good example? Would you have a good example, Tal, of an operator that does day 2 operations well?
Well, not in telco. I think if you go to Red Hat's, you know, operator hub and look at all the operators you have to install, I would say 90% of them have to do with databases, right? Because this is the classic stateful. This is a stateful application that you want to give it a declarative interface, right? So that's a great example use case for operators, right? Because you give a declarative interface and you encapsulate all the complicated logic if it's changing a MongoDB replica set or you know, scaling a Postgres database. All that kind of stuff you hide behind a declarative interface, and it's beautiful, right? This is kind of the superpower of the operator pattern in Kubernetes. Network functions are also stateful. It's less about storage, although we have those challenges as well, but it's more about network connections and links and making sure that they can stay up as long as they can while you're changing other aspects of the system. If it involves putting a load balancer or a proxy or something before that. So that kind of heavy lifting is knowledge that only the developer has, right? Say Ericsson, right? So if you can bake that intelligence into an operator, you're really strengthening the whole system. I mean, there's so many advantages to that.
Yeah, no, that's So it's So NFs could be classed as stateful as well in that scenario. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, Kubernetes as itself can self-heal, right? It can restart a pod, but there's a cost to that. If a pod is restarted, you're probably going to lose user connections.
Yeah, you lose that.
Phone calls are going to break, right? So yeah, that's the kind of power that Kubernetes can promise, but we have not realized that power entirely. So I will say from Google's perspective here, right, as a Kubernetes vendor, and many of the reasons that you hear from Google and from all of us at Google that we're really pushing operators and CRDs as a solution here is because we really want to use Kubernetes to the maximum, right? And we think and believe that Kubernetes has a lot to offer to telco in this respect in terms of self-orchestration. But it's a path to get there, right? It's not a trivial path to get to complete realization of that potential.
One last question to Simon. How do you find using Goland, the JetBrains tool?
I love Goland.
Do you? Okay.
Yes. I cannot live without.
It's licensed. Yeah, I'm using using VS Code. I think most of us use VS Code, do we? But I looked at Golang, but it's Liam didn't like it.
I think Steven uses Vim.
Stephen uses
So
Vim.
he-
Wow.
Well, it
Yeah.
wasn't that I didn't like it, but it's
Yeah,
coming from Jet.
I don't
it's co-
I don't code using IDEs, so sorry.
Really?
It's I never could get into IntelliJ, and which is just more IntelliJ for me.
I like the JetBrains tools. Yeah. Sorry, silly question.
Yeah, no problem. I cannot code without, if I'm coding in Java, I cannot code without IntelliJ.
One thing before we close it up, do we think the timing, the frequency of this meeting is good enough, or we want to take 15 days or something like that, just to hold with all the members?
It's fine for me, anyway.
So what's the question?
I
Do you want to
think I
change
have
that
one
from
question
weekly to
Simon
something else?
before he
Yeah,
drops off.
every week or 15 days at once? I'm just trying to ask a question. People can say. Frequency of this meeting, is it good that we are having every week, or should we have once or 2 week, is what I'm asking.
On the SDK front, I would suggest, we will probably start getting into some sort of execution phase, or at least POC phase, where it's not just piecemeal POCs. I would like to see more of an integrated POC. There's something. So in terms of executions, that would be nice to have meetings to talk about.
Yes,
Fiacre is like we're doing a lot of work right now, for one thing, and I think it's about time. I think
I think we should also
Sandeep or
recognize
Anish also have all the other things that are being part of this. So we may want to start putting things together. And
but I know that
Okay.
probably the time of the meeting isn't so good for our Indian friends.
I know there's too many times.
know,
So I don't want to bug you here.
It's 6 p.m. here, so
and another thing I do want to say is
p.m. there.
Yeah. Another thing I want to say is it's very hard to get a 9 a.m. slot right now. So let's keep it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if someone else takes it, it would be very hard to get something back.
Well, the other option is an early morning slot for us. And that's kind of late night for you, Stephen, and it's middle of the day for Sandeep.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Liam, so many of the US.
Oh, but you're in the. Okay. Oh, yeah. Bala, are you in?
Tao and Bala and Visha all in that.
Oh, okay.
That
Fair
situation
enough. You're in Central.
where if we do 11 p.m. meetings, they're not going to show up.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Fair enough. Sorry, bad idea.
Yeah.
But back to the general question about should we do it every 2 weeks? So I strongly sympathize with Fiacre's point that we have fatigue about this. We feel like we've been going in circles for 2 months over trying to make a decision and not able to. 2 things about this. I don't think it should stop us from getting a solution now for R2, whatever it is, even though it might not be the perfect or best solution moving forward. We're allowed to change our mind later.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the second one is, this is a very, very high stake topic for us, because it involves really all the network equipment providers here, and everybody is highly invested in Helm. So like it or not, I think we need to keep chipping at this. I do think we should continue doing weekly meetings.
Okay.
We're all tired.
But as I said,
No
I would like to move it out of like pure discussion phase and maybe starting to it's not so right now we do point POCs, which are nice, but then I would like to put things together and then see if it works in generally for the entire Nepio framework.
Okay.
And then plug in the pieces. So let's execute on that.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Okay.
So it will be weekly, continue to be weekly, just a poll. So okay.
Sounds good.
Okay then. Good
So
discussion for today.
One question, 2 points. Simon, really appreciate you helping us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks.
So
thank you.
in case any questions, can we bother you in the future? That's one thing I wanted to ask you.
Yeah, of course. Just reach out.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much, Simon. Really appreciate that. And regarding the tools, let's also not forget the tool that Sandeep and team has developed. So that's also in the picture. So I
Yes.
think, Sandeep, let's keep it going for a weekly cadence. We'll figure out how it goes.
Okay, sure.
Oh,
we'll
by the way,
continue.
okay, that's a good point. I created a Nephew SDK repo.
Right.
So anyone who want to file issues and things, go ahead and do that. So that we
Okay.
can track what
So
should
where did
actually
you
go in.
create that? Steve? Where
It's
did you
on
create
the Nephew. So it's an official Nephew. official
Okay.
Nephew. Yeah. It's not
Okay,
even
I think
experimental.
from the issues perspective, please let's use the Nephew itself, the
Okay.
main Nephew,
Okay.
because that's what we are using for creating all the issues, so that we can easily assign it. So I'm going to create an epic anyway today.
Okay. Cool.
We'll take it from there. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
That's good.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Cool,
Simon.
thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
everyone.
Thank you, Simon.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Take care.
guys.
Have a
You're
nice
welcome,
day.
everyone.
Talk to you later.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye. See you.
Bye.